Following breaking news out of New York City as police are searching for a gunman.
He ignores numerous other pedestrians, approaches the victim from behind, and shoots him in the back.
The defendant is charged with 1 count of murder in the first degree and 2 counts of murder in the second degree.
That is completely out of touch, and it's an insult to the intelligence of the American people.
It is extradition day for the man who's accused of executing an insurance CEO. Luigi Mangione could be whisked off to New York in a matter of hours. We are walking through today's expected schedule, and we're also following the money, crowdfunding efforts from supporters and the Mangione family, millions, how this accused killer could be paying for his defense. Also this hour, we are previewing Brad Simpson's bond hearing today. His family says he killed his wife, so what are the odds he makes bail? Plus, the case of a pregnant teen who allegedly dumped her newborn is under review. How New Mexico's highest court could be tipping the scales for Alexee Trevizo. It's all next, right here on Opening Statements. Welcome to Opening Statements. I'm Julia Janae, in for your host, Julie Grant, this morning. Thank you so much for following along with us. Just like an actual trial, the opening statements that we are presenting are to get you ready for what's ahead in the courtroom today, the coverage that we have across the country. Let's take a look at our daily docket.
The state of North Carolina versus Tazir Zarqa. We, the jury, by unanimous verdict, found the defendant, Tazir Zarqa, to be guilty of voluntary manslaughter. This, the 18th day of December, 2024, signed by your foreperson.
And here's a look at the stories ahead. Defendant Taz Zarqa found guilty of voluntary manslaughter in the stabbing death of Mark Garrity. His sentencing is set for 9:30 a.m. Eastern in North Carolina. We will bring you that live when it happens. And testimony resumes in the teacher's deadly driving trial for Amy Weiss. Court is going to convene at 10:30 a.m. in Colorado. And in Texas, accused murderer Brad Simpson has a bond hearing today at 10 a.m. Eastern. We'll keep you updated on that. But now to our top story. The United Healthcare CEO murder suspect is going to be facing a judge in Pennsylvania this morning and could be back in New York as soon as this afternoon.
What are you going to do? That is completely out of touch, and it's an insult to the intelligence of the American people and its lived experience.
Now, here's what we expect to happen. Luigi Mangione is going to appear in the Blair County Courthouse at 8:30 a.m. Eastern. The court is going to address his local charges there in state court, firearms and ID fraud charges. And then Mangione's lawyer says he's going to be waiving his extradition to New York, meaning he is going to allow them to go forward with extraditing him to the Big Apple. Now, once the paperwork is done, the NYPD is going to fly the murder suspect from Pennsylvania to New York, where he would be booked and photographed. Mangione would then be arraigned in the afternoon, or it could happen tomorrow. The Manhattan District Attorney announced Mangione had been indicted on first-degree murder in furtherance of terrorism. Mangione could also face federal charges out of the Southern District of New York. Now, federal charges could make Mangione eligible for the death penalty. Here to discuss, criminal defense and civil attorney John Phillips is with us, and criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor Matthew Tempanik. Thank you so much for being on with us this morning. John, let me start with you. What can we expect today in Pennsylvania?
We're going to start moving on this case. So, you know, Pennsylvania has jurisdiction, obviously, because that's where he was picked up. That's where he was found with the gun, and the McDonald's, employees identified him. So, there's certainly charges there, but the meat of the potato, as you just discussed, comes from what's going to happen in New York, and then the potential addition of federal charges. So, this is just kind of the start of the dominoes starting to fall for Mr. Mangione's criminal court life.
Yeah, and Matthew, the difference, I mentioned incorrectly that the death penalty might be on the table. Life without parole is the max that he would potentially be getting there in New York. But talk about the state charges that he has in Pennsylvania, because they captured him there. He does have, and we can take a look at the actual charges that he's facing there in Pennsylvania, where he is going to be dealing with the tampering with possession of instruments, tampering with records of identification, forgery, false identification to law enforcement, possessing those instruments of a crime. What happens to those charges once he goes to New York for what no doubt is considered the much more heinous crime?
So what's most likely going to happen is those charges are going to be adjudicated at the same time as the murder charges. Pennsylvania knows these are all relatively low-level felonies. However, they are still kind of like they are still charges that if he were to be acquitted of something, not saying he would be in New York, they could come back and charge him and convict him and hold him on these charges in Pennsylvania. So I think the most likely situation is he'll get a public defender in Pennsylvania. Those charges will be treated. But I definitely think they're going to see within cases before doing anything final in the case.
So we are anticipating, we know there's not going to be any cameras inside of that courtroom, so we won't get to see anything. But John Phillips, his attorney, Karen Agnifilo, great attorney, comes with a lot of accolades. She was a longtime chief district attorney there in New York. She knows that courtroom, that courthouse, those judges, they know her. What's it look like when you get a client like this and now he's back in New York and the process begins?
The thing you want in a case like this is to hire a lawyer, really from the locality, but somebody that's not going to be surprised or kind of fall in love with themselves on a TV camera, right? And a lawyer like that has been through it. They understand that the more important thing today is the criminal defense rights and the constitutional rights of my client, not press conferences and press statements, because sometimes people trip over themselves the first time they get a high profile client. And the better news, and we talked about it last week, is it's not Kim Kardashian, right? So Twitter and X wanted Kim Kardashian on the case, and no, she's not licensed to practice, but the attorney he chose certainly is.
Yeah, that has been the headline, but she passed a baby bar, not the full bar. That would have only been in California. But let's talk more about Karen Agnifilo. She did put out a statement. She hasn't done anything public, to your point, John, not getting in front of the cameras at this point, taking that time to speak to her client. She said that the federal government's reported decision to pile on top of an already overcharged first-degree murder and state terror case is highly unusual and raises serious constitutional and statutory double jeopardy concerns. We are ready to fight these charges in whatever court they are brought. What's the order of things, Matthew? What would go first?
Remember, under the Supremacy Clause, federal law trumps state law. So remember, they also have concurrent jurisdiction. So the feds can also charge first-degree murder as well as the state does. Terrorism charges are primarily federal charges. So I hear what she's saying about her statement, because terrorism would probably be something the Southern District of New York would be handling. I think what's going to happen is the feds are going to see how the evidence plays out. They're going to wait and see how the media plays out in this case, because you need to understand this. The feds don't want to take cases they could potentially lose. And the outpouring support, shocking as it may be, for somebody who allegedly executed a CEO, an innocent bystander, literal at the beginning of the morning, is something that 41% of adults 18 to 29 agree or somewhat agree with. So I think the feds are going to sit back and wait and see how the case proceeds before deciding whether or not they want to charge him in federal court.
And John Phillips, I know you're no stranger to high-profile cases. You've had high-profile clients before. You mentioned he's not exactly high profile in terms of celebrity, but this is a high profile case at this point. Can you talk about how he may be treated differently once he gets to New York? If it has to do with how he's incarcerated or just how the court will take into consideration the extensive amount of attention on this case?
This is a different one, right? And as Matthew was saying about, 41% approval rate, normally murderers don't have that when they walk into a jail cell, like when Joe Exotic, who I represent, walks into a new prison because they're transferring him, he's a celebrity, right? People have come from seeing him on Tiger King. This isn't exactly your traditional celebrity. And if he did this, he's a cold-blooded murderer. You know, again, the state's got to prove its case. The feds have to prove its case. But it's going to be interesting to see when he's in with hard and fast, you know, fellow inmates in New York, how he's treated, because, you know, generally, you know, somebody like him could prey victim to the very harsh circumstances, going from a family of wealth to a bunch of people that really don't care about your self-interest in jail.
Anna, you mentioned that family of wealth and what is backing this particular defendant. We are going to talk about that on the other side. So Matthew and John, stand by. We are going to get to our break, but coming up on opening statements, we're going to dive deeper into Luigi Mangione's money and the defense fund that is being raised for the murder suspect. Plus, accused murderer Brad Simpson is going to be back in court today for a bond hearing. This as the search for his wife, Suzanne, continues.
It is our sincere hope and prayer that Brad will find the compassion and courage to end his family's suffering by cooperating with the authorities to help us find his wife.
This was a depraved game of chicken.
Driving the wrong way into oncoming traffic.
He basically kidnapped me. There was not a kidnapping.
The fake kidnapping murder trial. Trial coverage today on Court TV.
People wanted answers, and people started locking their doors.
You know what it means. You know what you did, right?
Please hear me out. Please.
I said, OJ, everybody thinks you're guilty.
Now for what's trending in true crime. As Luigi Mangione prepares to face a judge later today, this is a live look outside of that Blair County Courthouse in Pennsylvania, where there's going to be a hearing over his extradition to New York for the accusation that he is the one who killed CEO, United Healthcare CEO, Brian Thompson. And we're also looking at the money moves in this case and whether that will be in his favor. There's a Give, Send, Go fundraiser page that we're learning about that was created to help aid Mangione's defense, and it has now reached over $150,000. This campaign was formed by the December 4th legal community. They had set a goal of $500,000 to send directly to Mangione if he chose to accept it. Now, the organizers write in part, "We are not here to celebrate violence, but we do believe in the constitutional right of fair legal representation." The organizers' spokesperson had this to say about critics while speaking to CNN.
And I think for every person who might be exhibiting some sense of joy, there are 10 people sort of asking the question, well, who's the real murderer in this conversation? We're talking about the largest and most successful private health insurance corporation in the history of humankind, right? Which is successful precisely because they generate profits by denying claims, among other things.
Other crowdfunding sites accepting donations for Mangione's defense, such as GoFundMe, have been taken down. This morning, we are asking, should supporters be allowed to fund this defense? Let's bring in our panel to answer that question. Criminal defense and civil attorney John Phillips is with us, and also joining the conversation, retired FBI special agent Jennifer Coffendorfer is with us. Jennifer, let me start with you. What's your reaction when you see that people are happy to give money to someone who is accused of being an assassin?
Well, quite frankly, in this case, it's absolutely ridiculous. First of all, his family is worth around $100 million. They have plenty of money. They don't need this. To me, this is just absolutely grandstanding behind his name. If you look at the people involved in this, where was their stance on health care prior to this? It didn't exist. And what's going to happen to that money? Because I don't think it's going to Luigi Mangione. He has plenty on his own. So to me, it's just a ploy and ridiculous.
It's a good point. We don't know exactly. There's really no way to know for sure sometimes with these crowdfunding sources how the money is going to be given to the person. But John Phillips, it's not the first time we've seen a legal defense being raised by the public. What comes to mind most recently, Kyle Rittenhouse made a lot of headlines over getting a lot of money that impacted bond and impacted things in his case because he had so much money that people were donating. George Zimmerman many years ago, people were supporting financially. Your thoughts on whether or not supporters should be allowed to fund a accused criminal's defense?
Right, and I've used these. I've used these in many cases. I've used them in my litigation against the Trump administration, where there's extreme wealth and power on one side, but you have clients that don't have it on the other side. And with Mangione, we don't know how much his family is going to contribute or donate, or whether this clause in the grandmother's will, if you commit a crime, you may not get family inheritance. How that works. But GoFundMe as a business, so this is kind of how you spend money and how you speak is First Amendment, right? But GoFundMe and these other entities are private individuals, private companies. They don't have to abide by that. And I know in raising money on Joe Exotic's case, we couldn't raise any money related to his criminal defense. That is their policy. They're strict about it. They'll shut it down. But if you're raising money for health care, you're raising money for other causes. We made it to pay Carol Baskin back at the time. They do allow it. But there's these other, resources because, look, some of the people setting these things up are good people and altruistic. Some are looking for their own secondary gain and their own political messaging. I think this happens to be the latter.
You mentioned the family. So let's talk about the fact that what we have learned about the background of Luigi Mangione is that he comes from a very wealthy background. And according to Fox News, the grandmother of the killer the accused killer reportedly left millions to her children and grandchildren after she died, with one condition in this trust, that any grandchild receiving an inheritance from her could not be charged or indicted or convicted if they were convicted of a crime or pleaded guilty to a felony. But it also says indicted there. And again, according to Fox News, Mary Mangione left roughly $30 million behind with those guidelines. So that includes a physically violent act, a violent act against another person or property, or any drug-related felony. So we're wondering, will his family be funding Luigi's defense? And Jennifer, we've heard from the family that they are shocked. They cannot believe that this has happened. They've asked for the prayers. They've said that they are praying and their thoughts are with the victim's family, Brian Thompson. Your thoughts on whether or not his family is going to be front and center, which we sometimes see even in cases like this?
Well, I think it's very clear they're funding him. He had a retained counsel straight away for the Pennsylvania case. He has one of the highest dollar attorneys that there is in New York, and she's good. And, that was retained before any of this money was collected. Look, they paid for him $40,000 a year to go to prep school. They paid $80,000, $90,000 plus to go to an Ivy League school. I think they're going to financially support him. In fact, we see it already. So I don't think he's going to be for want of anything, and he never has.
John, I'm reminded of being in a Pennsylvania courtroom waiting for an extradition hearing for Brian Kohberger in the Idaho student murders. And he was there for the first time being named as a suspect. And I watched an entire row of his family there, really standing in solidarity with him. They had to have been blindsided by this. The media had been, attention had been just immense in the days leading up to that hearing, but we were all learning this name and they were there mouthing, I love you to him. What's it like for families when you have a family member whose face has been splashed everywhere for a really heinous crime?
Julia, it's awful. I sat in a courtroom a couple of weeks ago where on one side was an entire family of a 18-year-old boy, essentially, who stabbed his girlfriend repeatedly to the point of paralysis. And on the other side was her family and supporters. And one side had more righteousness on their side, but that doesn't take away the loss. When somebody's essentially sentenced for life or facing a life sentence, that this is somebody they grew up with. They saw the good side of him, and it's tragic. Many judges, when they're doing sentencing, will say, well, there's no winners in this courtroom today. And certainly there's going to be people that turn their back that was in his family, and there's going to be people that, pay his bills and, $40,000, $100,000, $200,000 for legal fees when you've got wealth of, 7, 8, 9 figures is kind of small, relatively speaking. But, again, it goes back to the ultimate issue in this case, which is, one, healthcare is abysmal. But what you usually see is people with the assets of the Mangione family having better options. But yet here we have somebody who, took life in his own hands in retaliation, as alleged. And I think it's why we're all fascinated.
Jennifer, let me ask you this as a follow-up. Are you surprised that someone who does come from the means he does, which sometimes we see people get a lot of support when people know that they won't be able to pay, they won't be able to have access to the resources, but it's been pretty clear in reporting that he does have this family background. Are you surprised that people are rallying around him the way they are financially?
Well, I think it's the ideology that's been exposed that they're rallying behind, actually. And then when you look at the face of this, I mean, this is a handsome young kid. He's charismatic in what we've seen on social media and so forth. He's certainly very photogenic. And so I think he is very easy to rally around in that regard when you really don't look at the fact that he cowardice shot somebody in their back.
This is a man accused of murder and on top of that, terroristic murder, according to the New York District Attorney. We are going to have to take our break, but John Phillips, Jennifer Coffendorfer, thank you so much for weighing in on this case as we stand by waiting for that hearing to start. Here's another live look. This is the only video that we have right now because no cameras allowed inside of that Pennsylvania courtroom. But this is the Blair County Courthouse where Luigi Mangione is expected to arrive at 8:30 a.m. Still to come on opening statements. Here's what's tipping the scales for Alexee Trevizo, the teen mom who was charged with murder after her newborn was found dead in a hospital trash can. Her trial is now in limbo. But first, we are going to pay attention to an accused murderer's case. Brad Simpson, he's back in court for a bond hearing today. Court TV field reporter Cody Thomas is going to join us and walk us through it all next.
She called me up and told me the things that Brad had done to her physically.
Brad Simpson buys 2 bags of Quikrete cement, a construction bucket with a lid, heavy-duty trash bags, a 30-ounce bottle of Clorox disinfectant, and insect repellent.
This helps us come to terms with the reality that Suzanne is no longer with us.
She called me up and told me the things that Brad had done to her physically. Well, I came up with an alternative plan for her in the hope that she'd move in with me. I never got to tell her the plan.
We are turning our spotlight on the case against Brad Simpson. He's accused of murdering his wife, Suzanne, and the mother of their 4 children. Brad Simpson has a bond hearing today at 10 a.m. Eastern, and we're going to talk about what could happen at this hearing, where we are in the case as we could be getting closer to a trial. Joining us now in studio to break it all down is Court TV field reporter Cody Thomas. Cody, you've been following the case. You've been there in Texas, investigating this case, looking into what details police have and what it's like there. So talk to me about what's going to happen today.
Yeah, good morning, Julia. The hearing scheduled today for accused murderer Brad Simpson is a bond modification hearing. Essentially, Simpson and his attorneys are expected to argue some sort of change to the conditions of his bond in an effort to try and get him released until his trial date. Brad Simpson is being held at the Bexar County Jail in Texas with his current bail set at $5 million. He's accused of killing his wife, Suzanne Simpson, whose body is still missing, and it all happened back in October. Now, along with the murder charges, Brad Simpson also faces charges of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, tampering with a corpse, and possession of a prohibited weapon as well. Also, in a recently unsealed indictment, it was revealed that Suzanne Simpson's DNA was found on an electric saw owned by Brad. That indictment also says Brad knowingly tried to conceal that saw as the investigation was going on. And Julia, we also know that a gag order was recently issued in the case by a Texas judge in an effort to not taint the jury pool. The gag order says, in part, The court finds that any further interviews, statements, or releases of non-publicly disclosed information contained in discovery to the media would only serve to increase the volume of pre-trial publicity. And the latest news to come out in this case involves Brad Simpson's longtime business partner, James Cotter. Cotter was indicted earlier this week by a grand jury on charges of tampering with evidence with the intent to impair an investigation and possession of prohibited weapons as well. This comes after he had already posted bond on similar charges back in November. And Julia, following whatever decisions are made during this morning's hearing, Simpson already has his next court appearance scheduled for April 8th of next year.
All right, I do want to bring into the discussion so that we can talk about this case, where it's going. We have with us retired FBI Special Agent Jennifer Coffendorfer still with us. Jennifer, that information about the friend who's been indicted for trying to impair the investigation, along with all of the other information Cody just gave us, do you think there's a chance he could be getting bond? Because he keeps trying.
He keeps trying, but I don't think he'll get it. Interestingly, though, his friend's bond was reduced from $1 million down to $100,000. So maybe this is giving them hope. But the bottom line is you have to look at two issues, right? Is he a danger to the community, and is he a risk of flight? He meets the check mark on both of those, I believe, based on what the allegations are and the strength of that evidence.
You know, I got to ask Jennifer, though, when you say a danger to the community, do you think he would be a danger to someone other than, unfortunately, Suzanne? You know, he's a father. He may try to say that this is a reason that I wouldn't leave the area. I want to fight these charges. And there's not a body in this case.
Right, but look, you know, his best friend and business associate is out now, and he's going to provide possibly very important evidence to the state. He hasn't turned yet, but I could see this happening for him to spare himself going to prison. And that's somebody that I think could possibly be in jeopardy. Also, some of these individuals, these men who killed their wives, if he did so as alleged, they become family annihilators. We've seen this in many instances where they will go out and they pose a danger to their other family members.
And the family members is a huge part of this. We've seen them. They've been very visible. I actually want to play some sound before I ask you about it, Cody. We have Bart Simpson, the brother of Brad, which is surprising, but also Suzanne's sister spoke to News Nation. Let's take a listen to what they've had to say publicly.
It is our sincere hope and prayer that Brad will find the compassion and courage to end his family's suffering by cooperating with the authorities to help us find his wife.
From my understanding, you know, they had this fight at the Argyle Club. They came home, the neighbors witnessed it, and I just assumed that, you know, they had figured the whole thing out that night, and so I didn't fully understand the severity of the situation. But once I understood that, you know, the children hadn't spoken to her in 16 hours, that's when I just knew, okay, she's already in heaven. That's just all there is to it.
Now, Cody, you've been there in Texas. You have been to the key places in this investigation. Tell me what you learned, something surprising that you mentioned to me about his movements and what the family must be thinking when they see what police have discovered.
Yes, Julia, that day after Suzanne Simpson allegedly went missing, Brad was all over the place. Those locations were released in a police affidavit, and I followed those steps step by step, location by location. And the most egregious part of it, he drops his 5-year-old daughter off at kindergarten first before he embarks on this journey. And this journey includes him going from his home all the way out to Boerne, Texas, which is about 45 minutes away. He's arriving at a Home Depot. He's buying Quickcrete cement. He's buying Lysol bottles, heavy-duty buckets, heavy-duty trash bags. Of course, we know Suzanne Simpson's body has not been found. We don't know her exact manner of death, presumably, but those kinds of things give us an indication of what may have happened. And we also know her DNA was found on that electric saw. And then he goes out to the Kendall County dump, which is also in Boerne, Texas. It's a solid waste dump. He's there. Surveillance doesn't pick him up there, but his location on his vehicle is picked up there for a few minutes. So a lot of suspicion. That's how the indictment was brought upon by police, because You're at Home Depot buying these questionable items. You ask a stranger in the Home Depot parking lot where the nearest dump is after you buy these items. You go to that dump, and then ultimately we found out DNA is on that saw. Kind of gives us a sad indication of what may have happened.
And that's how they got to probable cause to up those charges to first-degree murder. Jennifer, they don't have a body, and you're hearing Cody talk about this solid waste dump that they have searched. Do you think it's possible that they will go back and search more? What typically happens when you're dealing with a landfill or a dump area where you think it's possible there may be remains?
Well, this is such a difficult search. You may recall in the Quentin Simon case, it took weeks for FBI agents to comb that, because you're not only looking north to south, east to west, you're looking deep. So you have to go through level by level by level. And it is a most difficult search, as you can imagine, due to decomposition, animals, birds, other things. It's just very, very difficult to find human remains after this amount of time.
Jennifer, have you ever seen situations where a defendant behind bars either pleads guilty and somehow allows authorities to know where remains are? I don't often see it, but I'm curious.
It happens, but it's rare, especially in cases like this. I mean, I feel like he is going to fight tooth and nail against these charges, because they don't have a body. And so I think that's going to give he and his defense team hope that they could acquit him of these charges.
Cody, have we heard anything from Brad Simpson himself? Any kind of statements he perhaps made before he was arrested?
He has said absolutely nothing. And in fact, at a previous hearing, he pleaded the fifth down the line when he was asked questions about anything to do with this case. So we have heard nothing from him, no verbal statements, no indication of anything about him having anything to do with Suzanne's disappearance.
And remind me, today we're going to have that hearing at what time?
At 10 a.m. So coming up very soon.
All right. We will, of course, I know, keep everyone updated on what happens in this case. Jennifer Koffendorfer and Cody Thomas, thank you so much for your insight into this case. We have a lot more to get to coming up on Opening Statements.
Just as we were getting ready to open the door, she opened it, and all I saw was like blood everywhere, like on the walls, on the toilet. It just looked like a horror film.
The Alexee Trevizo case, it's still pending, but new legal documents approved by New Mexico Supreme Court could possibly tip the scales.
Tonight on Court TV.
I'm Vinny Politan. Welcome to Closing Arguments. We have a big hour ahead here.
Your deplorable actions are unforgivable.
The community still doesn't know how this Boston police officer died.
He can't prove one element of his case. It was a dramatic day, a dramatic moment inside the courtroom.
What's happening here?
It's unreal. Let me show you exactly what happened.
Closing Arguments with Vinny Politan. Tonight at 8/7 Central. Only on Court TV.
Now for what's tipping the scales in the case of a New Mexico woman who's accused of murdering her newborn. Alexee Trevizo was a teenager when she gave birth in a hospital bathroom last year, left that baby in a trash can. Prosecutors charged her with first-degree murder, but the case still hasn't gone to trial. New Mexico's highest court has accepted new documents that could be used during the case review. One of those is from the ACLU. They're raising concerns over the legality of law enforcement being inside of the emergency room like they were in Alexee's case when she was speaking to her doctor.
I'm sorry. He came out and I didn't know what to do.
Alexee, I told you about this.
But
I just asked you, baby, to tell me the truth.
It was not crying or nothing.
Talking there with the doctor and with her mother. Now, a judge at the trial level did grant a defense motion to suppress those interviews because of the custody nature of the law enforcement officer being there. But the prosecution has appealed that to a higher court. The American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists and the National Police Accountability Project, they also sent in their own amicus briefs to the court. So those briefs were wondering, could it tip the scales and result in a decision, and more importantly, a trial date in this case? Let's bring back in to discuss criminal defense attorney and civil attorney as well. John Phillips is with us. John, so in a situation where you have an appeal in the middle of a case going to trial. We often think about appeals being at the end of a case, but here they haven't gotten there. But because of this ruling by the judge in the pretrial stage, the prosecution wants those admissions in. Your thoughts on them trying to get those in at the pretrial litigation stage?
This is both a horrible and a fascinating case. You know, you've got a girl who was in a bathroom for 20 minutes. The hospital workers can talk about how bloody the scene was after. And, you know, the question from the state side is, you know, there was air in this baby's lungs when she was born versus, you know, Alexee's lawyer suing the hospital and claiming she should have never been on the medication she was on and they failed to treat her. So, you know, and then you've got police coming into a room where you've got somebody treating for severe back pain, but also now, you know, a childbirth of a stillborn baby or a baby that was killed. And all of that wraps up into the Bill of Rights and, you know, the right to both incriminate yourself, be Mirandized, but also literally have a doctor standing next to you who, and you're a 19-year-old girl, and you're making confessions in front of your mom. And so, you know, it's a fascinating case when you get into, you know, doctor-patient privilege and waiver and what police can do inside a active, you know, emergency room. And so when you have all these issues, you have cases like this where the OBGYN, you know, think tanks are weighing in, and the ACLU certainly are weighing in related to this girl's rights.
Oh yeah, you're so right that there's so many layers to this case because of all of the people involved. You've got HIPAA violations and constitutional rights that are at stake. Let's go back to that moment that you mentioned where she's in the hospital room with her mother. There's police body cams rolling and a doctor also present.
How big is the baby?
It's full term.
What? 9 months? Nothing was crying. Alexee, have you watched the news of the girls that what they do to their babies and what they go to jail? Nothing was crying.
So my question, John, is do you think they need these interactions as far as the prosecution? They have the medical evidence. They have the testimony of all of these doctors who afterward they were interviewed about what they saw at one point, when they didn't see her, when she was in the bathroom, when she didn't respond, when they were knocking on the door trying to figure out what was going on in that bathroom, the blood all over the place inside. Do they really need to have these interactions where a police officer and a doctor are present?
You know, and I know every good prosecutor, every good police officer is going to fight for the best evidence they can get in their case. And when you have essentially a confession and you know, some really hardcore admissions on tape, you want to introduce that to the jury. But on the same token, you know, you don't want to do without it, because this young lady is going to get a lot of sympathy for being 19. You know, the defense is going to say her brain wasn't fully developed and you know, that she just didn't know and didn't have, again, healthcare in America, didn't have, you know, she was one of the 2,400, I think, women that have babies after a full-term pregnancy. I think the state wants and needs this video to come in, but again, the problem, you know, is the invasion of rights and privileges that come with it.
The invasion of privacy, for sure. Let's go back to these interviews, though, that all of the medical professionals did with police, which may raise some HIPAA issues as well, but we know what has been suppressed is her interaction with her doctor. But let's take a listen.
She put the baby in the trash can, and then she put another clean liner over the top of it.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So when they looked in there, there was no trash in there, but it was underneath the clean bag. The baby's dead. Okay, we have him in trauma too, but she killed a kid.
Yeah. How old was the baby?
I don't know. It's full term.
It's just so hard to hear the details, John. You mentioned that the ACLU has weighed in, the OBGYN think tanks, as you call them. They filed these amicus briefs, which literally means in Latin, the friend of the court. They're just submitting these briefs so that the court can take into consideration these stats and the issues and the problems that they say there are with the state being able to use that evidence. Just how compelling do you think these amicus briefs are going to be to a high court there in New Mexico?
You know, it's a question that I think all lawyers that handle appeals want to know. You know, I know appellate judges read them and their law clerks read them. And in this one, you know, it's not surprising, and I don't mean this disparaging on the ACLU. Actually, it's a compliment to the ACLU. I don't always agree with them, but they always weigh in on human rights. And you know, again, you have a 19-year-old who made a horrible mistake, and you know, you can, but I think the state can prove it without some of this. And then, you know, the main issues here that we're addressing, like the interview with the doctor, this is a treating physician who owed her privacy. But on the same token, he's almost being interrogated as an expert witness who gave the opinion that she caused her child's death. And there's lines that should be suppressed in that statement and probably lines that shouldn't be. You know, it's going to be fascinating to watch.
Oh, you're so right that can be very compelling to a jury. Even if that doctor isn't an expert witness on the stand, just by nature of being a doctor, they are going to have a lot of credibility. And they've already made that statement that this wasn't necessarily a stillbirth. I think that's going to have a lot of weight.
Well, let me add this too, that who's his patient? So certainly Alexee was his patient, but at some point, baby John Doe or Jane Doe, he does have an obligation to, right? If that baby came into his hospital, and frankly, they're being sued for the death of that baby, you know, you've got the stacking of issues and obligations and you know, medical ethics that you've got to deal with, and you know, they can't, the defense can't have it both ways, that the hospital caused the death, but and you're going to sue the hospital, but also the hospital better not defend themselves and say anything.
Yeah, let's take a listen to what some of the nurses had to say when they were interviewed.
He was blue, he was tucked in there. She had him wrapped in one and twisted and then folded under him, and two more on top of him, and then another trash can, a clean one, in the trash line. So when I broke it open, he was tucked here, and there was nothing.
Sorry you had to go through that. I'm serious.
Yeah, everybody, it's just crazy.
Yeah, I know. And that's not the placenta had?
No,
okay. That's
we shipped her, yeah, that's
okay.
where she went to Loveless.
Oh, Loveless
in Roswell.
Yeah. Okay, I'm sorry. I misheard Lubbock, I'm sorry.
Yeah, she still hadn't delivered the placenta.
John, what do you think happens next in this case? Will we see a trial, or do you think once all the dust settles, there will be some kind of a plea?
I mean, a 19-year-old girl, right now, based upon the posturing of the state, I do think we see a trial. You know, but again, you get into criminal justice in America and public defenders and how it depends on what the appellate court says on this evidence. You know, I hope they take their time and try to get this right, because it sets a precedent for all of our people that are visiting emergency rooms. But on the same token, we've got to take care of our babies and minor children too.
Absolutely. It's a case with a lot of implications. John Phillips, thanks so much for all of your analysis this hour. Have a good rest of your day. That's it for opening statements. We have a lot more to get to, because Court TV Live is on the other side of this break. We're going to turn to New Mexico for the fake kidnapping murder trial for Janine Jaramillo. We have a live report next.